The NBA trade deadline has already come and gone, and we saw some insane deals go down. Big names packed their bags ahead to a different city, and they are going to be doing all they can to change their new team's fate. In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at some trades that were made this season that will most likely turn the rest of the season on its head. Can Cleveland make a return to the top of the East? The Cavaliers have not been a real threat in the Eastern Conference since LeBron James was on their squad back in 2016, but after the trade they made with the Indiana Pacers, they may be able to at least compete with the big boys in the East this year. The Cavs acquired Caris LeVert from the Pacers in exchange for Ricky Rubio, the Cavs lottery-protected 2022 first-round draft pick, a second-round selection in 2022 from the Rockets, and a second-round selection from the Jazz in 2027. You could argue that the price tag is a bit much for LeVert, especially because his shooting numbers have been less than ideal compared to the rest of the league when you compare him to other elite players, but he is very effective on pick and rolls and can use his size to drive the hoop well. LeVert also finds a way to make some difficult shots that other players in the league could never make, which I think will make a huge impact on the Cavs season. Obviously, the Pacers have been less than ideal this year, and when you think about it, even though they were making the playoffs consistently over the past few seasons, they were always bounced in the first round, making their playoff appearances completely irrelevant to the history of the franchise in the league. They had no reason to keep a player as talented as LeVert, and I think that this will allow them to drop to the bottom of the Eastern Conference and the bottom of the league, which will get them closer to the highly touted first overall selection in this year's draft. The Pacers need to rebuild if they want to have a shot at the championship, and getting the first overall selection in 2022 is a good start, and the slew of draft picks they acquired won't hurt them either. Moreover, this is a great opportunity for the Cavs to hopefully do some damage in the playoffs this year. I think the East is a bit too stacked for them to have a shot at the finals, but they can at least gain some momentum going into next season. Speaking of Eastern teams that are stacked, let's look at the big trade that went down at this year's deadline. Next, 76ers and Nets exchange superstars. The Philadelphia 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets are two basketball clubs that need no introduction to the fans of the NBA. These two teams have been in the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference for the past few years, and after the deal between the two clubs that took place at the trade deadline, that fact has still not changed. The Nets gave up James Harden and Paul Millsap in exchange for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, a 2022 unprotected first-round pick that can be deferred until 2023 if the Nets so choose, and a first-round pick in 2027 that is top 8 protected. If you ask me, I think both teams and both disgruntled players technically got exactly what they wanted. The Nets had no interest in re-signing the 32-year-old elite veteran, especially since he had expressed interest in leaving Brooklyn in free agency due to the issues surrounding Kyrie Irving, and the Sixers had an elite 25-year-old that had absolutely zero interest in playing for them. Why would either team not try to sell their asset for a better one? I think they both did their best to improve their situation, however, and I think there is a clear winner in this trade. But first, let's talk about how these players are going to help their new clubs. First of all, James Harden is one of the best players in the NBA when he is focused and when he is in a place in which he wants to play. We have seen in the past that when Harden's not happy, he simply does not perform. Do you guys remember when he put on like 50 sweaters to warm up with the Houston Rockets prior to his trade to the Nets? He looked like he gained 300 pounds when in fact he was just doing all he could to get himself out of Houston. What a guy. Anyway, he clearly had no interest in playing for the Nets anymore, so it was definitely in the Nets' best interest to trade him for immediate help. Harden can be an effective shooter for the Sixers, and I think he drives play better than 90% of the league, making him an offensive threat that most teams will have difficulty covering. This is an immediate boost to the offense of the Sixers, and I think that Harden's game will mesh really well with Joel Embiid, the second superstar on the Sixers. What did the Nets gain from the trade? While we obviously know that the Nets gave up one of the best players in the league, I do believe that getting the younger player that is locked up until 2025 is a huge return for the aging superstar. Simmons is excited to get back to work and do whatever he can on a stacked Nets club and hopefully bring them to the finals. Simmons' game will be a godsend for the Nets. Firstly, Simmons is an absolute menace when he doesn't have the ball and makes it impossible for the opponents to guard his team. Simmons also is an amazing complementary player and usually meshes well with other amazing players, except for Joel Embiid, of course. But I think that Simmons is an excellent addition to this squad, but hilariously, he was not the only asset that the Nets got in return in this trade. Along with Simmons, the Nets also acquired Seth Curry, brother of legendary shooter Steph Curry, and Andre Drummond. While Drummond and Curry are both on the older sides of their prime, they are both excellent complementary pieces for a championship caliber team. Seth will make for an excellent off-the-bench shooter, and Drummond will certainly find a way to make the most of his court time when he is replacing the already established big man in Brooklyn while Marcus Aldridge. Along with the two extra players that came to Brooklyn, the Nets also received 2 picks in the first round of the NBA draft, so when you put this trade down to brass tacks, who won it and who lost it? The Nets won this trade by a country mile. I know some of you are thinking that the Sixers got the better player, ergo they won the trade. Well, let me tell you why that is dumb. The Nets are one of the few teams in the league that can say, we traded James freaking Harden and we still have our best player on the team. That's right, Kevin Durant's a better player than James Harden anyway. Giving up Harden to complete your roster is insane. The Nets now have a shooter who can replace Joe Harris, the shooter that the Nets have been missing for the last 3 months due to an ankle injury, and if he cannot make it back for the first round of the playoffs, having a player like Seth Curry to ensure that the team still has an above-average catch-and-release shooter on their roster is a potential difference between a Game 7 loss and a Game 7 win. Additionally, Andre Drummond's no slouch. While he's a bit past his prime now, he will be a very usable replacement for their big man when they need him to be. While I believe that Harden's the best player involved in this trade, the Nets got the better end of the deal. The Nets are still sitting pretty with KD, Kyrie Irving, and now Ben Simmons, along with Seth Curry and Andre Drummond. Along with that, they got 2 first-round picks. Not only will the Nets perform better than the Sixers for the remainder of the season, they will be better in the long run with a much more complete squad and the assets to help keep the team loaded with skill due to the picks they acquired. Not only that, if the Nets had actually kept Harden and they decided to sign him, they would have had to fork over an insane amount of money and had made the team pretty strapped for cash. But now with Simmons locked down till 2025, with a pretty team-friendly deal that's worth about $19 million less than they would have had to pay Harden to keep him around, the Nets found a way to make themselves better after trading one of the top 10 best players in the league, and I don't think very many teams could have done that. Is this trade going to drastically change the league this season? Yes. I think this trade makes the Sixers more competitive now and gives them a chance of punching their ticket to at least the Eastern Conference Final and possibly farther. Anyway, that's all we have for you guys today on the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.